everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of FSI. I wanted to mention something, two arguments, two articles that I came across over the past couple of weeks. The first one was Pastor Thomas Boer's a rebuttal of an argument made by Corey Mahler on paganism, European paganism, pre-Christian paganism, and Christianity. Now, Mahler essentially says, he claims that pre-Christian pagan worship among Europeans glorified God. He says that it was pleasing to God and that God was glorified by it. Pastor Boer does a very good job of refuting what I do believe to be heresy on Mahler's part. I'll link to Pastor Boer's article in the description below so you can read it for yourself. But it's basic Christian orthodoxy that outside of Christ we are at full enmity with God. We are opposed to God and to the true worship of God. And the natural man can do nothing that pleases God. And in Christ we find salvation. That contrast, Christian orthodoxy has always maintained that contrast throughout. Now it's interesting, Corey Mahler is a Lutheran. And just this morning I read an article written by the editor of Occidental Descent, Hunter Wallace. Now, I think most of you would probably be familiar with Wallace. He's been around for a very long time. And he wrote what I believe to be an excellent article. Link will be in the description, of course, where he contrasts white nationalism, and in particular the way that white nationalism has manifested itself in an American context over the past couple of decades. But I believe this applies to other white nationalist movements and manifestations across the globe as well. And he shows how white nationalism wrongly sees the heart of our socio-economic and socio-political problem as demographic in nature. White nationalists wrongly see demographics as the core problem. And then, of course, they also see it as a solution. Deport all illegal immigrants or people of African descent out of the United States. And that would essentially solve the problem for white nationalists. Then it says that Christian nationalists, in contrast, view the problem as fundamentally spiritual and moral. It is about our covenant with God and our covenantal disobedience to God. Now, Wallace doesn't use those exact words, but the essence of his argument is exactly that. So Christian nationalism differs from white nationalism in that we see that all nations, regardless of the racial component of those nations, the racial composition of those nations, because indeed we do have white nations and we do have black nations and Asian nations, but all nations, regardless of race, face the same essential problem. And we fight the same essential battle. And that battle is spiritual. Now, in saying that, it doesn't mean that we deny the reality of race. It doesn't mean that we forsake our natural affections um, that to our kinsmen, to our fellow uh, white men and women, to our fellow, to our people, to our own people. But it does mean that we do not see others as the enemy. It means that we see all nations as called to submit to the Lordship of Jesus Christ, and that all nations can together worship the one King of heaven and earth, while still maintaining those ethno-racial distinctions. And I thought it was striking that both Mahler and Wallace are Lutherans, but they are taking two very different paths here. I believe Mahler is taking the path of what I would call white nationalism and the heresies that accompany that path, while Wallace is rightly taking the path of Christian nationalism, which I believe fully accords with Christian Protestant orthodoxy. So yes, some food for thought, but um I would advise all of my viewers to go check out those articles. You'll see the links in the description. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of FSI.